Привет, друзья, and welcome to Start Russian. And in today's video, we're talking about the dative case in Russian. And remember that in order to use a Russian case correctly, you need to know two things about it. First is the meaning of the case. What does it mean? When do we use it? What triggers it? And second, the form. How do we actually put words in that case? What endings do we apply to words in order to put them in that case? But first of all, let's look at the very name of the dative case. Why is it called dative? Dative takes its name from the Latin verb dare, which means to give. Same thing in Russian. In Russian it's called дательный, and to give is дать. And it actually makes perfect sense because the verb to give is the most common verb you will see used with dative. Which brings us to the meaning of the dative case, and its fundamental meaning is indirect object. So what is indirect object and what does it have to do with giving? And how is it different from the direct object, which, as you may remember, we used with the accusative case? Usually the action of giving involves two objects. First is the thing that you're giving, which is the direct object. And secondly, the person you're giving it to, which is the indirect object. So grammatically, the direct object will always be the accusative case in Russian, and the indirect object will be the dative case. For example, I give the dog food. So the food is the direct object because I act upon it directly. I pick it up, I put it in a bowl, so I'm acting upon it. It's the direct object, and grammatically I will put it in the accusative case. And the dog is the indirect object or the indirect recipient. Because if I'm giving something to the dog, I'm not doing anything directly to the dog. I may not even touch the dog. So the dog is indirectly involved or affected by this action. So grammatically, the dog would be in the dative case. Now let's look at another example that starts the exact same way. I give the dog. But in this example, the sentence is going to be, I give the dog to my wife. Now in this example, the dog would be the direct object because I'm literally acting upon it, right? I'm picking it up and I'm giving it to my wife. So grammatically, I would put the word dog in the accusative case, whereas my wife would be the indirect recipient or the indirect object and hence would be in the dative case. Although again, importantly, in English, both sentences start the exact same way, right? I give the dog, but the word dog would be in different forms in Russian. And we'll come back to this example in a second, but first let's look at the form of the dative case. So how do nouns change when we put them in the dative case? So masculine and neuter nouns in the dative case would take the ending u or you. Remember guys that for most cases in Russian, masculine and neuter nouns pretty much always share the ending. And then feminine nouns in dative will take the ending ye or sometimes e. In most cases, it's ye, but occasionally phonetically it may have to be an e, but you can't really even hear the difference. So think of it as the ye. So let's go back to our two examples. So all the nouns in those examples are feminine. Собака, dog, еда, food, and жена, wife. So I give the dog food in Russian would be я даю собаке еду. So еду is a feminine noun in the accusative case. Hence, it takes the ending u, because again, it's the direct object, of course. And then собаке is the indirect object, and hence in the dative case, and as a feminine noun, it takes the ending ye. So in Russian, when you say собаке, that already means to the dog. You don't need a preposition or anything. Again, собаке already means to the dog. And then in our second example, I'm giving the dog to my wife. I would say я даю собаку жене. And in this case, again, the word собака is in the accusative case because it's a direct object, and therefore it takes the ending u. And then жене means to the wife, so that's the indirect object, so we're putting it in the dative case. And again, as a feminine noun, it takes the ending ye. Let's take a masculine noun. Я даю другу книгу. I'm giving a friend a book. So here we have the noun друг, which is a masculine noun meaning friend, and then книга, which is a feminine noun meaning book. And of course, again, книга is in the accusative case because it's a direct object. I'm giving the book, so we apply the ending u. And другу is the indirect object or indirect recipient. He's the one receiving the book, so we put it in the dative case, and as a masculine noun, it takes the ending u. So interestingly, both nouns in this sentence take the ending u, but for different reasons, right? So if you understand the Russian grammar, if you understand cases, that should make sense to you. And technically, neuter nouns in the dative case would also take the ending u, just like masculine. But it's very difficult to think of an example with a neuter noun because, again, the primary meaning of the dative case is indirect recipient. So generally, that would be someone alive, right? Something animate, like a person or a pet. And of course, animate nouns can almost never be neuter. They're either masculine or feminine. So, besides the verb to give, dать in Russian, right? What other verbs would you commonly use with dative? And really, it can be any verb that has a recipient, right? Someone on the receiving end of an action or a transaction of sorts. For example, дарить, to give something as a gift. Покупать, to buy something for someone. Показывать, to show something to someone. And something as simple as говорить or сказать, to tell or say something to someone. So all these verbs would likely have a direct object as well in the accusative, right? Something being gifted, something being shown, something being bought, etc., right? And they would have an indirect object or indirect recipient. So that's the person you're buying it for, you're showing it to, you're telling it, right? And that person, of course, grammatically would be in the dative case. For example, я дарю жене цветы. I'm giving my wife flowers, or literally, I'm gifting my wife flowers. My wife, of course, is the indirect recipient, so it's in the dative case, and as a feminine noun, it takes the ending «е». Я покупаю сыну мороженое. I'm buying my son an ice cream. So мороженое is the direct object, and that would be, of course, in the accusative case, but сыну is the indirect object, and of course, we're putting it in the dative case, and as a masculine noun, сын takes the ending «у». Я показываю другу город. I'm showing my friend or a friend the city. So, город is the direct object. That's what I'm showing. That's what I'm acting upon directly. So, that's in the accusative case. And then другу is, of course, in the dative case. And again, as a masculine noun, it takes the ending «у». Я сказал Анне привет. I said to Anna, or I told Anna, hi or hello. So here we have a proper name, Anna, right? But that's technically a feminine noun. So since I am telling something to Anna, again, she is the indirect object or the indirect recipient. And we're putting her in the dative case. So feminine noun Anna takes the ending «е». So to Anna is Анне. And of course, guys, please keep in mind that in this video, I'm only teaching the very basics of the dative case. There is more to it in terms of both meanings and uses and forms. But if you're just starting to learn cases, that's a great first video for you for the dative case. Okay, guys, I hope you found this video helpful. If so, be sure to give it a like. And of course, subscribe to my channel, Start Russian. And thank you very much for watching. And I look forward to seeing you in my next videos. And until then, пока-пока.